Good afternoon. The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council for August the 4th, 2015 is now in session. Reminder, if you'd like to speak tonight, to sign up on the member comment sign-up sheet. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Council, are there any amendments or changes to our agenda for tonight? If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We have an agenda. I need a motion, Council, to approve the consent agenda, which is the approval of the minutes of July the 7th, 2015, and a resolution 2015-08. 01, resolution adopting annual fire inspection schedule.
So
Do I have a
moved.
motion? Thank
So
you.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the recognition of employee recognition for years of service. And the first person on the list is Daryl Brickhouse, Corporal Daryl Brickhouse, who is, has been with us for 10 years. Exceptional police officer in my mind. I know Daryl pretty well and have observed him the time I've been mayor and before that. Unfortunately, Daryl can't be here tonight because he has a conflict because of his watch schedule. So we'll save the recognition of him, the formal recognition of him, to a later date. In addition to Daryl, I'd like to recognize our town manager, Peter Rasco, for his 5 years of service. I want to thank you, Peter, on behalf of council for your efforts for our town for the past 5 years.
Thank you, and the council, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Peter. Just a side note, I was fortunate enough to have my own company for over 30 years, and I had a lot of employees. I had good ones and I had bad ones, but I had a lot of good ones. And I have come to the point where I can recognize pretty quickly somebody who does a good job and somebody who doesn't. And I'm proud to have Peter work with us and proud to work with him. He's just an exceptional at his job, exceptional work. The next item on the agenda is a briefing by David Alberg from the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary. Sorry, David. If you want to come down and do your briefing, you're certainly welcome to.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Thank you for giving me the chance to come and speak to you tonight. My purpose here tonight is really to introduce ourselves, and it's to some extent about 40 years overdue. The sanctuary was established in 1975 to protect the shipwreck of the USS Monitor, about 16.8 miles off the coast of Cape Hatteras. And in the last few years, our site, which is actually the office, is up in Newport News, Virginia, where the Mariners Museum is. We've worked very closely with academia and other partners, but we probably haven't done as good a job as we needed to in getting down and talking to the communities. So we're trying to do that, and I wanted to get a chance tonight to talk a little bit about what we do beyond just the Monitor, how we came to be, and highlight some of the partnership opportunities that may exist between us and some of the local businesses. The sanctuary, as you know, was established about 1.5 years after the Monitor was discovered. Monitor, of course, being the Civil War ironclad involved in the Battle of Hampton Roads that was lost on New Year's Eve, 1862, taking with her 16 men, and remained a mystery where that ship was for many years until a team from Duke University found it in '73. And the The shipwreck at the time sat outside of state waters, still sits outside of state waters, and actually it was on the high sea, even beyond, at that point, the U.S. territorial sea. That's since changed with the 200-mile EEZ. But the concern was, how can we protect this shipwreck? And in 1972, an act was passed by Congress called the National Marine Sanctuaries Act, which gives Congress the ability to designate special places in the marine environment based on their biodiversity, their recreational value, their archaeological resources. And that act had never been used, so the governor of North Carolina requested NOAA use the act to protect the Monitor. So a 1-mile column of water was established, and for 40 years, and for most of its early history, it was mostly just archaeologists that were down on the site. Scuba diving was not as advanced as it is today. So much of it was just research, but in the late 80s and early 90s, Congress asked us what were we going to do, what was the plan long-term to protect the Monitor and get the public more involved. And as we looked at it and looked at the corrosion that was taking place on it, the decision was made to remove iconic pieces of the wreck, the turret, the engine, about 200 tons of the wreck, bring it to the surface and find an institution that was qualified to take care of it. Ultimately, the only one in the country that could handle a project this size was the Mariners Museum. But Congressman Walter Jones Sr. at the time wrote legislation that assured that once a suitable facility was established in North Carolina, components of the shipwreck would come back. So between 1998 and 2002, working with the Navy, recovered these large pieces. They're being conserved, and then we began to work with the graveyard of the Atlantic Museum, ultimately providing about $2 million in funding to what was then a nonprofit institution to get the building built, and have provided about $750,000 to help them with exhibit design, with the hope that the state's budget situation would eventually improve to the point where they can provide funding to finish off the exhibitry. Once that's done, artifacts from Monitor will come back to that site. But in the absence of that, we've tried to find ways to work with that museum on temporary exhibits, working with the North Carolina Aquarium on Roanoke Island, and other locations, even Jeanette's Pier, to get the Monitor out of the water virtually through exhibits and public programming. And not just the Monitor, but many of the other shipwrecks that sit outside the waters of the Monitor Sanctuary, but are still important to the country. Over the last 7.5, 8 years, we've focused a significant amount of work on better understanding of the World War II losses off North Carolina. In October last year, we found the 4th missing U-boat, German U-boat, the U-576, that we had been looking for and many had. And it's I bring up this particular U-boat because it's a good example of the power of maritime heritage to draw people's interest into an area. An assessment of that story, it had over 790 million media impressions when that story ran last October, with a media value estimated at about $11.5 million. And that's just the discovery of one of about 2,500 shipwrecks off the coast. So people are very interested in this. And what we've tried to do is find mechanisms to leverage heritage tourism and leverage even people that aren't going to get out in the water but are just coming to the shore to help build on this very powerful history of the graveyard of the Atlantic. And I was pleased to see David Stick's name on the building next door, obviously a man who was maybe more than anybody responsible for capturing this history and promoting it. Other ways that we do it, in your packets I've left you just since you've got nothing else to do, give you a federal management plan to read and some other materials. But one of them that I'm quite proud of is we've produced a series of plastic dive slates. One of the concerns that we have tried to be sensitive to is the fear that NOAA's involvement in these shipwrecks is about keeping people off the wrecks, and in fact it's just the opposite. These plastic dive slates, the one I think you've got is the U-352, which is just off of Morehead City, but there are a couple others. On one side is what we call a site plan, so when a diver gets out there and it's on plastic so they can take it with them, are the key elements of the shipwreck, so it's basically a field guide. On the other side is the history of the wreck, and just as important, the laws that protect it so that we get people out on the wrecks in a responsible manner that assures that the wreck is there for the next generation of divers. And we produce these with our partners, East Carolina University, the Park Service, Coastal Studies Institute, and then provide them to dive shops at no cost so that they're out there and being distributed. Another way we work with the community is within your packet is a list of our advisory council. We have a citizen advisory council which consists of both governmental and non-governmental seats. And we have shifted more focus to local folks. So we have individuals from Dare County, just a few, Jim Tobin, Jim Bunch, the folks from the Coastal Studies Institute, and others that provide us guidance on our management plan, the development of the document that you've got there, and on our activities. We also work with local businesses. This past June, we did a beach survey to try to help the state out by doing some survey work on some of the beach wrecks down near the Huron, but did that with Roanoke Island Outfitters in a partnership where they brought in divers. We trained them in basic archaeological methods to give the divers a little something to do, a program we call the Nautical Archaeological Society, or NAS training, and then used them as volunteers out on this wreck. We set up a tent on the beach so that the public that was watching this could come ask questions about why shipwreck preservation is important and what we were doing. And I was pleased to see that the Roanoke Island Outfitters reported back that they saw an increase in business based on people going back and wanting to buy snorkels and fins and things like that. So anything we can do along those lines, we try to do. We worked with the Park Service and others to create a iPad tour along Highway 12, I believe at present we have about 12 sites on there that focus on obviously the Monitor, World War II, even some of the ecology and the Pea Island Wildlife Refuge. And these videos can be downloaded from the web for free. You can also get them on an iPad for free at the Graveyard Museum. And then as you go up the coast, it will indicate where you pull over, and there's about a 3 to 5 minute video. But again, all designed to try to help the local economies and, of course, what's most important to know about the maritime heritage of the area and trying to advance that. Our program, after the Monitor was established, today it's grown to 14 sites around the country, really around the world, from American Samoa and the Pacific, Northwestern Hawaiian Islands and the islands of Hawaii that there are 3 sanctuaries there. Stellwagen Bank, 1 in Lake Huron at the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, Florida Keys, and about 14 sites. Each of them managed a little bit different depending on the resource. Monitor is what we call a single resource site. All we look after is the wreck itself. So fishing is allowed. There are some restrictions on certain types of fishing, for instance, bottom trawling, which would obviously have an impact on the wreck. But any visit out there on any given day, weather permitting, is filled with fishing boats out there, and we encourage that. And as I said, we'll continue to try to work more in the communities. One of the things that came up in the development of our management plan was the question of should the Monitor expand at some point to protect additional wrecks. So that question was incorporated into the management plan, and if NOAA makes the decision to explore that further, it would start with a notice of intent that would kick off public scoping meetings and public hearings to discuss, well, what would the impacts to communities be? How could we do this in a way that would be beneficial? Does NOAA have the money to do it, or do we leave things the way it is? And look at all options would be put on the table. And so I wanted to get in front of you so that if you ever have any questions about the Monitor or NOAA, you've got some face to put to the name, and we can be happy to answer any questions you may have. So. With that, sir, anything I can answer for anyone? And from the audience as well.
Yeah, if you have questions, you're welcome to ask them as well.
I have one question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
You named this the Monitor Sanctuary, but it's really the area. Is it named after the ship? I mean, the way I see the definition from the act that's put in there, it's an area that's specified. It's not just the ship, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, at present, yes, ma'am. It's just the ship, the USS Monitor, the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary. But we've been doing a lot of work in the area known as the Graveyard of the Atlantic, beyond the 1 mile column of water that's officially designated as the sanctuary. And we do this under the authority of our Maritime Heritage Program with the state's limit at 3 miles, and they do a tremendous job with the shipwrecks that are either on the beach or in state waters. Once you get past those 3 miles, many of these shipwrecks, the U-boats, many of the about 88 World War II wrecks, many of those are grave sites, and they are protected under federal law, but the reality is there's nobody really out here looking at. The Coast Guard looks after them, but most of the Coast Guard presence off coastal North Carolina is a response presence for search and rescue. So these wrecks are there, and the dive community, for the most part, has done a really good job of promoting them, but they're businesses and they can only take it so far. And I think what we've tried to do is take it to a higher level. One of the things that we were most proud of is we had National Geographic come down about 3 years ago, and they did a 1-hour special on the Battle of the Atlantic based on NOAA's work. And that was one of the top shows aired during their Explorers Week on TV. And some of the comments that we got back that I was most proud of is there was an individual that died on a ship called the YP-389 during the Second World War, right out here. Small story, one of thousands around the world. You know, it's not Coral Sea or Guadalcanal, and so it's sort of been lost. This individual is from Great Falls, Montana, and when the ship was found, Great Falls Tribune newspaper ran a front page story 70 years later about their lost son, Fireman First Class Wilson Cole, and his loss off coastal North Carolina. And it really demonstrated us, again, the power of maritime heritage to connect a ranching town 2,000 miles away in Montana back to coastal North Carolina, and the power that combined history is to bring people out here to want to see it, even if it's just standing on the beach knowing that history's out there. So beyond just the monitor, there are, as I said, many, many stories to be told, and we're trying to find ways to do that.
That's what I was getting to, because there's so many wrecks out there. It's
Yes,
amazing.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Monitors at what depth?
230, 235?
So they can free dive, I guess, and get to it or not?
They can. It is of all the sites in the system, the monitor has been managed more restrictive than others, so it requires a permit to get out to it. We issue permits. We've never denied a permit, but we want to make sure that we're working with individuals to make sure that they're doing it right and that the wreck is protected. Generally, it's considered a pretty technical dive with lots of advanced gases and things beyond my level of understanding, but I am sure that people have in the past just dove down and on air, but you'd be hanging in the water for quite a long time to decompress.
Question, you
Yes,
said there were sailors on that boat when it went down. Have any of the remains been recovered, or what has happened with that?
Yeah, and in the management plan, there was one of the 8 action plans that we had for the last couple of years and the next 3. There were 2 individuals when we were removing the turret, getting it prepared to come up through the water column. They found human remains. And so the recovery at that point stopped. We anticipated that may be a possibility, knowing that 16 men went down the night she sank. So the Navy and NOAA made the decision to bring it up, and once the turret was on the deck, a second sailor was found. There's a facility in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii called JPAC. The facility was created primarily to deal with Southeast Asian remains that were found after the conflict, Korea, Vietnam, but they have handled and identified individuals all the way back to the War of 1812. And so they, because these were U.S. Navy sailors, the remains were transferred from NOAA to the facility in Hawaii. And for about 10 years, they worked to identify them. They had positive DNA, or they had good DNA from both. They had age and height, but they had nobody to compare it to. And over the years, people had come forward, but they weren't good matches. So in 2012, we took the skulls with permission from the Navy, made computer casts of them, and then did one of these forensic facial reconstructions to try to, as I've said, shake some family trees and have people, you know, didn't we have a relative that was on the monitor, go up to the attic, look for some pictures, that type of thing. And we ultimately were able to connect with about 114 individuals that were related to monitor descendants, either that had survived or had died. We weren't able to identify them, but perhaps more importantly, that effort got enough attention that the Secretary of the Navy broke with protocol and released the remains for burial at Arlington. So if you go today, they were buried in March of 2013 with full military honors. The Secretary of the Navy did the eulogy there at Arlington, and they are buried in Section 46 near the mast of the Maine, honoring all 16 men who died, but being listed as unknowns. And it was, you know, obviously I'm biased being superintendent of the monitor, but it's one of these stories like Titanic that just continues to capture the public's imagination, anything monitor. And I would say there were probably close to 10,000 people on a very cold March morning in Washington that were out there waiting to see these individuals laid to rest. And it was definitely a very moving tribute to them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great presentation, we appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Just one thing, if you haven't been to the Mariners Museum in Newport News, it's worth going, and you'll see that turret there, and up close and personal. You can actually walk inside of it. It's pretty fascinating.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you again, David. Appreciate it. This time I'll open public comment. Mr. Dave Barker.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council. The only thing that I would like to extend is an invitation to each and every one that's here to come over to my house. I live at 226 North Dogwood this Saturday morning. The parade starts at about 5 a.m. for the outbound tourist, and the inbound starts at about 8 a.m. And from then up until about 4 to 5, 6 p.m. at night, it's a steady convoy of traffic. It's terrible. There's 8,000 to 10,000 cars in each direction, and it's terrible. And if you haven't seen it, come on over Saturday morning. I'll furnish the coffee, the drinks, whatever you want. But I would just like for you guys to see what I live every Saturday and every Sunday. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. Mr. Bill Cogger.
Okay, going to be starting me. I timed this a couple of times at home, but hopefully I'm not going to digress too much. I had promised in February that I would come back with pictures about some of the things that I find good and bad about site clearances and especially clear cutting. Unfortunately, the pictures can't get projected, but I will try to be a yeoman and try to make it come to life to everybody. I'm sorry, especially to the audience. Please move closer. With my back to you and no pictures.
Move closer
Closer to the microphone.
Okay, is that better?
a little closer.
One of the other things I wanted to do was hand out a copy of what I have worked up as a spin-off from the spin-off of Doug's vegetative ordinance, which I find rather officious, arduous maybe. Just, you may want to throw it away or whatever, but it's my view. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, people doing this and that in these various committees, but anyway, back to the pictures, which I guess you all have copies up there. If I can make them come to life a little bit. Okay, the first picture I was going to use was a picture of my neighbor's house on Gingite Trail. They did an especially good job of ingress and egress management, keeping a lot of trees. They wound up keeping overall something like 40 trees in the front, and they kept all the big trees in the back. And so I call that my good site. I think the owner is probably a fellow tree hugger. I guess everybody knows that's where I'm coming from right now. Now the picture number 2 is an example. I think everybody's been by there. It's 100 dogwood. It's very apparent. It looks like a beach, part of the beach there. It's cut it out. They've completely stripped the front of the lot, uncontrolled, no trees at all, whether it's dogwood, hickory, or whatever. And I wish I had had a survey of what was there before. But even with major landscaping, the stark nature of the site will remain a long time. Picture number 3. Gosh, I have 30 seconds left. Picture number 3, this lot is at 131 Dogwood, and I can't even begin to start on this one. It's wrong in so many levels, not the least of which was the site clearance, which allowed for extensive runoff onto the street. And I'm going fast. In summary, to wrap up, I think it's not too late for a reasonable vegetative ordinance. There's like 400 lots left, 7 beautiful lots in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Van Giesen? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Joe Van Giesen, 228 North Dogwood. I just want to bring your attention to in the event that you're not aware, that we have a looming problem with traffic on the North Dunes on the weekends. This first became apparent to me when a local resident on Sea Oats complained about traffic backup on Sea Oats 2 weeks ago on a Saturday, apparently resulting in some conflict between the out-of-town drivers over road rage issues apparently that required the police to participate. I was riding my bike this past Saturday and I came upon a backup of traffic approximately 100 yards north of Hickory on Sea Oats. Traffic heading north that was backed up from there all the way to the Sea Oats intersection at Route 12. At the same time, there was a backup on Wax Myrtle of similar length. This backup on Sea Oats was more than a mile long. The traffic was backed up on Hillcrest from Route 12 all the way across Wax Myrtle and Sea Oats, beyond the crest of the hill and back down the other side, approximately 100 yards. This is ridiculous. All of these cars are from out of state. They are all trying to cut through to get to north part of the banks. The town council has not done anything about this. I urge you to consider action. This cannot continue. You talk about wanting to do road construction projects because of safety issues. This is a safety issue. People can't ride their bikes safely. They can't walk safely on the roads. We don't need sidewalks. We need to get rid of the cars that don't belong here. Another safety issue is, I know the chief of police and the fire chief are concerned about access for emergency vehicles. Try to get an emergency vehicle through a traffic jam like that on a Saturday morning. It is not possible. So please, resurrect your efforts to do something about this. We had a big dog and pony show here a year ago at the school. Nothing came of it. You just wring your hands and say there's nothing that can be done about it. Something has to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newberry? Good afternoon, Fred.
I'm Fred Newberry, 267 North Dogwood Trail. I'd like to make a few comments about sales tax redistribution. I attended the press conference over in Nanteo yesterday where all of the mayors were there and a lot of other folks. And one of the things I wanted to point out, Mayor, you indicated that in the press conference yesterday that the impact of this sales redistribution will probably be a shortfall of about $500,000 over the next 4 years, or that translates to about 8% of the current budget. And you also mentioned that, that could impact road projects and bulkhead projects that you have planned. The other mayors provided a lot more detail, a lot more analysis, and showed greater impacts. And I guess what I'm concerned about, has Southern Shores really gone into the details of our budget and really carefully analyzed it to be sure the impacts aren't greater than what you indicated yesterday? I'm concerned about that because we've got to figure out how to compensate in programs in Southern Shores for any shortfall in sales tax revenue. And how's this going to be done? I mean, it's not clear to me how you're going to compensate for even just that $500,000. I mean, are you going to raise taxes? I mean, there are lots of things to consider. And I've thought of a couple myself, and one, I thought that if we discontinue some of this high-impact road development, such as the Dogwood intersection, Scuppernong Fairway, and those, we could save quite a bit of money. Don't get me wrong, I favor road rebuild, but not with all the gutters and elaborate storm drainage systems and any street widening. Also, we could liquidate the property that y'all bought a couple of weeks ago, maybe get some money there. But finally, raising taxes is not very feasible. I don't think the people in Southern Shores want that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred. Our next speaker is Mr. Carroll, Tommy Carroll. Good afternoon, Tommy.
Tommy Carroll, 77 East Dogwood. I think everyone has heard, and I know everyone is very aware of the volume of the traffic that's coming through. I know a couple years back, I think 4 or 5, we did a count, and I think it was the police chief did a count of how many cars were coming through. And I think we need to do that. I would ask the town to do that. Someone told me there might be one on South Dogwood. The old one was in front of my house on 77 East Dogwood. I think using years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I believe it was, as a benchmark, really town needs to find out, how many cars are coming through there now. There's been attempts to reroute people down to the Outer Banks, what have you. Let's get a count now what's coming through. We've talked about the volume enough. What we need to pay attention to, forget about the volume, is, and Dave Barker brings up a good point, I don't think anyone could really get a good idea of what's happening on that intersection until you actually see it. I can tell Dave and Jody and Larry and Leo and the rest of the folks here how many cars and how fast they're coming through. It is alarming to watch. From someone who used to watch it in years past, I've been there for 14 years, to watch it now, whether they going north, taking a right on East Dogwood Trail, whether they stop at the sign, roll through the sign, or ignore the sign, the speed at which they increase going through there. And I don't think anyone, I can talk about it and we can send pictures and the pictures of you need to go up there on Dick White Bridge or over at Dave's for donuts and coffee or Bloody Marys, but you need to watch it. Someone is going to get hurt. For the first time in 14 years, I didn't witness it, I wasn't there, but I heard about 2 cars colliding at that intersection. I don't know, I believe the police responded to it, I'm not sure. That's the first time in 14 years. Okay? Someone is going to get hurt. Let's put the disagreement about the trees and the road projects and the stormwater aside. Someone is going to get hurt, and it's your responsibility, Peter's responsibility, the council's responsibility, Chief Cole's responsibility to prevent that from happening. And I don't want to come back here and say, yeah, I told you so. It's alarming at this point. The speed and the recklessness going through that neighborhood has gotten out of control. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Al Yearling. Afternoon, Al.
Good evening. My name is Al Euling, 187 South Dogwood Trail. I don't think I have to rehash just what Tommy said. I think at that intersection, I'm the one who's lived there the longest, and this year has gotten ridiculous. I would just like to ask a couple questions. Number one, at that intersection, since they've redone it and it's completed, why haven't they painted the street and put in the stop, the white stop at there? Just a reminder for some of these people, it might catch somebody off guard and say, hey, we're supposed to stop here. Also, when we did in the spring, had those big meetings, we came up with the couple ideas, that young lady that ran the meetings and so forth, and out of it, there was really nothing for our residents. They came up with the idea of the police at the 12 and 158 intersection. They changed the no right on red. They put up the signs, do not block the intersection. For our residents, if somebody's crazy enough to try to go out somewhere on a weekend, there are no signs on East Dogwood, Hillcrest, Chickahawk, Sea Oats, at the lights that say, do not block the intersections. You know, other towns got them put up. Kitty Hawk had them put up on that intersection. Why can't Southern Shores get anything done? And I would just like to know, just for the heck of it, was any of our, I know the chief had said possibly our officer would be taking up some of the time at that intersection, one of our officers possibly. I'm not going near that intersection. I'm just wondering, was any of our officers used at that intersection this summer? And for how many hours? And who those hours were billed to? Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate it. At this time, I'll close public comment. Thank you. Mr. Haskett, Town Planner.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I have a brief report for you tonight for the month of July. And I have a different format up here as opposed to what I used to use, so just a little bit more information you all can look at. I can provide it ahead of time as well if needed. It breaks down all the permits that were issued during the month, cost, the nature of the permit, location, things of that nature. But in summary, 5 zoning permits were issued, 29 building permits were issued, which consisted of 1 new single-family dwelling, 1 remodel repair, 2 remodels, 2 additions, and 23 others. There are currently 11 single-family dwellings under construction in the town of Southern Shores, and the total amount of fees collected in July was $5,703.03. With respect to code enforcement, 1 warning citation was mailed to a property owner for the open storage of building materials without a permit. And with respect to Planning Board / Board of Adjustment, there will be an August 17th meeting of the Planning Board performing the duties of the Board of Adjustment for the a variance request to allow a side setback encroachment. This was the meeting that was to be held in July. However, we had to move it back. We did not have a full 5-member quorum. But I spoke with the members today. Everybody should be able to attend. That concludes my report. Any questions?
Thank you, Wes. Council, any questions?
No, I don't have any.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our Police Chief, David Cole.
Good evening.
Good evening.
July 2015, the report. As you can see, we had 1,145 calls for service. We had 41 incidents, which are broken down for you. We also had officers had 20 arrests. We had a total of 9 motor vehicle accidents. Officers for the month of July stopped 228 vehicles. Out of that, they wrote 95 written citations, and they handed out another 90 warning citations. And officers, along with our community resource officer, also handed out 40 summonses for local ordinance violations as well. What I will tell you is that you're not going to get an argument from me. I've been in that traffic for the last 4 weekends trying to get up to Duck to mow some lawns. And this is probably one of the worst weekends I've ever seen. What I can tell you, I think Mr. Carroll already left. We do have traffic counters out, and we're in the process of still calculating that. There was a minor motor vehicle accident. It was a rear ender on East Dogwood and North Dogwood, South Dogwood Trail intersection. The car did stop for the stop sign, and the car behind it didn't. And it was a rear ender. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, for a breakdown July 11th and 12th, which was Saturday and Sunday, officers conducted 17 traffic stops. Majority of those were either on sea oats or wax myrtle. And out of the 17, they issued 5 warnings for speeding, 2 stop signs, and actually another 4 more stop signs. That was a total of 6 stop sign violations. We had 1 DWI and 3 that were unlicensed operations. The weekend of July 18th and the 19th, officers conducted 32 traffic stops. And this is just on Sea Oats, Hillcrest, 2 of them were on South Dogwood. Out of the 32 traffic stops, we handed out 22 citations for speeding, another 4 for stop signs, 2 warning citations. 13 of those stops were on Sea Oats, 8 were on Hillcrest, and again, 2 of them were on South Dogwood. July 25th and the 26th, 38 traffic stops. We handed 22 speeding citations out. These were all on Sea Oats. 30 of the stops were on Sea Oats. 22 for speeding, 9 of those were warnings. And then they handed out another 7 stop sign violation tickets on Sea Oats. This last weekend, August 1st and 2nd, 17 traffic stops. They handed out 10 written citations for speeding, 1 for a stop sign violation, and they had 17 other warnings that they issued as well. The officers are very progressive in what they've been doing as far as the traffic. It's a public street. Anybody's welcome to drive on it. Until you change that, there's not an awful lot we can do about it. What I can tell you is I've become aware of another software application, and it's called WARE. And anybody here wants to Google it, they can Google it. It's W-A-R-E. It's very popular in the West Coast. It's very popular here now. And it's real-time GPS that you load on your app on your phone, and it'll turn you and send you through, depending on how the traffic and is pinging off of all these apps, of all these phones. And again, it's real time. It will reroute you through neighborhoods. An example being is, I was in that same traffic on Sea Oats, and this is the worst it's ever been. I thought I'd be smart and go up Hickory. Well, I got to Hickory and I got on Sea Oats, and that's never been backed up like that. I've always at least gotten to 11th Avenue. And when I finally, 45 minutes later, I got to Hillcrest from Hickory on Sea Oats, and was finally able to get onto the last stretch of Sea Oats, I started seeing cars making left-hand turns going up Kingfisher. Well, that app is sending them up through there, and what they're doing is they're just butting in front of the other ones. The problem you got is you got 10 pounds of crap and a 5-pound bucket, period. Because once I get through Duck, I'm fine. But it's, you know, you've got a 4-lane traffic, dump it into a single lane. So if you stop them from coming through here, it's just going to be that much more that's backed up over the bridge. But this new application that's out doesn't help things either. The other thing that I would like to present to the town council and the town manager, and I apologize, it's late, but it is done in our 2014 annual report.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, good job.
We also have copies of that available to the public if they want. They can stop by the police department, and eventually we're going to try to get that on our website as well. Questions?
Quick question for you. I've heard this from other sources. I just want to see if you concur. Has there been a reduction in the road rage incidents at Highway 12 and 158, or is it about the same?
Well, now they're taking all their aggression out on our officers.
Yes.
So in that respect, yeah, it's reduced it. But when you tell them to turn around and you make them go back the other way, again, the only thing we're doing is we've been requested through a mutual aid agreement with Kitty Hawk, along with all the other agencies, that all we're doing is trying to keep the intersection clear. That's all we're trying to do. And once we do that, our officers have found that it's easier, and you'll notice when our officers are doing it, they're out of the car and they're actually making sure traffic is not blocking the intersection. If they do, what they do is they turn them around and they make them go all the way back down and start over. So,
Where do they go back down to the light there at Juniper? and-
well, if they're smart, they'll go down to either Food Line or they'll go over and turn
Yeah.
around in the Walmart parking lot.
Yeah.
But, you know, we've had a couple say, you mean I got to go all the way down and back over the bridge? And we'll go, well, if that's what you want to do, sure. So,
David, I have a question.
yes, sir.
I noticed that the speeding violations, since the 11th, I guess, and my count is at 60 plus here. Do you have any idea as to how much of that is local and how much is out of town? You knew I was going to ask that question,
Sure
right?
did. I have no idea, but I can tell you that all that traffic is not just tourists. It's locals. I mean, I'm one of them, and I can tell you, I've seen a lot of the pool guys, you know, the cleaners, they're all trying to get
Yeah.
to their jobs north of here. And it used to be great. It used to be a nice little secret cut through, but it ain't no more.
The secret got out.
Well, but you've got all these different applications and things that make it a lot easier for people to.
Have you used this application?
I thank you for that information, because you know I'm off of
Oh, I know.
fishing. And Saturday, when I saw that traffic coming up, I said, is there an accident up there?
No.
We actually walked up because we thought an accident happened. Now we know how it's happening.
That's right. On my way back, I have a ladies' lawn that I mow up there off of Soundview. And I know, I counted, there was 25 cars that actually come back up around,
Circle around, come
back around.
into it.
And those were not locals. Those were all from Jersey, most of them, but
Have you used this application?
no.
I mean, just to test it to
No,
see
I'll
what
tell
you
you how I
get?
found out about it. I received a phone call from some reporter from Los Angeles that apparently one of his editors was stopped and given a ticket by one of our police officers. And she felt that we were using this app to target speeders. First of all, we didn't know anything about the app. And second of all, I don't see how that tells you that people are going to speed. You make the decision whether or not you're going to speed. I don't think the app provides that.
Especially if
And
the
so
traffic's
that's how we actually found out about it.
If the
They wanted to
traffic's backed
know.
up, they're not going to be speeding
Yeah.
anyway.
No.
So, welcome to social media.
Yes. It's not
Thank
the
you.
best.
Could I ask the chief a question? Do you have any plans at all to try to help the traffic at my intersection? Put a dummy cruiser there or a station somewhere? Not this year. they haven't. I've embarrassed you?
We're going to try to do whatever we can.
How did I embarrass you, sir?
Let's cut the conversation.
Yes, we'll try to do whatever we can. But we've got limited manpower, and we have to deal with where we get the majority of our issues, and most of the issues are speeding issues right now. And what we're trying to deal with. Yeah, we'll try to help.
Thank you, David. Always good. Our fire chief, Ed Limbacher.
Good evening, everybody. Just a simple report tonight. For the month of July, the fire department responded to 68 total calls, and it breaks down fairly simply. Apologize, the second one, garbage dump and sanitary landfill, that should be someone was burning garbage in their backyard. It just got miscategorized, so I apologize for that. But a total of 6 actual fires this month or last month, 44 EMS assists, 3 motor vehicle accidents with injuries, and those were all on 12. 1 pedestrian motor vehicle accident, again, that was on 12. Motor vehicle accident with no injury was 2. Remove a victim from a stalled elevator, 1. Assist surf ocean rescue, 1. Vehicle accident general cleanup, 1. Public service, 1. Unauthorized burn, 1 standby or move up, which just meant we mutual aid with somebody. 1 dispatch cancel within route, and 4 4 system malfunctions or faulty detectors, whatever you wanted to call it, and 1 lightning strike with no fire, which I believe contributed to blowing out all the town stuff as well. It was right over here on 12, so. Anybody have any questions?
Of the 44 EMS calls, were they all here local, within?
Yeah, all
Southern-
the EMS calls are always in town, yes. Yep.
Is that an increase over previous months?
Last year
or-
was,
Seems like it's a large number, I mean, for our size, but,
last year was 41, so it is a little bit of an increase,
oh, okay.
so.
Any other questions?
Nope. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it.
Good evening.
This time I'll ask Councilman Lahan to give us his report on the Capital Improvement Planning Committee meeting, the most recent one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Capital Improvement Plan Committee met on July 9th this year here at the Pitt Center at 2 p.m. with all members present. The purpose of the meeting was to look at the fiscal 2016, 2017 capital improvement plan, which is a continuation of the list that we have published in the past, and look at the remaining streets on that. The Capital Improvement Plan Committee was tasked with visiting those streets and making recommendations, and Rachel provided us with, this is Rachel Patrick, who is the representative from the town's staff, with a new rating type of sheet that we could use for rating the streets that we visited. And that would give us a sort of a common method by which we could look at the ratings that we come up with. We'll also ask that if we have any additional streets that we'd like to add to that, the committee is certainly welcome to do that. She asked that and we agreed to have these rating sheets and these comments back to her by October 1st of this year, so that she may start compiling the new list for a review in our next meeting, which will be on October the 15th. That's all I have.
Any questions?
I don't have any.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Leo, Councilman Holland will give us the Finance Committee report this time.
Okay, the Finance Committee met July 16th over in the Town Hall Conference Hall room. People attending that was the Finance Officer, the Town Manager, Public Works Director, myself. Mayor Bennett is on that committee, but he was absent due to a doctor's appointment. There were no members from the public in attendance. We had 2 agenda items that we talked about. The first one was a review of the unaudited end-of-year financial reports. And the key there is, because you all got copies of the end, that is unaudited information. And so I want to make sure you keep that in mind, because there's some adjustments that'll be made because there's outstanding invoices floating around and timing of billings that we get from Dare County, so that'll all be caught up. And one that you may have noted is the acquisition of the property next door. That was expensed at the time that transaction was processed. That funds will get moved out to expense, and that property will be capitalized on our balance sheet at audit, when she does the audit. And if necessary, a depreciation schedule will be established at that point. One positive out of it was you can tell building permits are coming up, because if you look at the numbers last year versus this year in budget, we are much higher than we had anticipated. So that's a positive there. One other item you may have noted, and then gets moved around. This was a town bike and pedestrian plan that we'd been presented to us during the year. That was partially funded with a grant, which paid 80% of that. So in one portion of the statement, the financials, you'll see the cost, and then you'll go to another part and see the revenue. So that's where that will go. But Other than that, all the departments are within their budget. Yes, there are certain line items you can go pick out, which I did, and are a little out, but the total department is in line with what we had budgeted for the 2014-2015 year. The next item that on the agenda that we reviewed was the construction contract bidding procedure. The town manager reviewed the state statutes and town current bidding policy for construction for bidding with us. We also reviewed the formal, informal bidding, noting that both the state statute and town policy requires that we do get in 2 bids, but it also allows us, the state statute is we can get informal bids on projects that are between 300 or between 30 and 500,000. And here again, we try to get more than 1 bid or 2 bids, but we're limited here. They have attempted over time to get other people to bid from all the way from the Norfolk, Chesapeake area to Rocky Mount. There's some contractors there we knew, but they don't bid. And I think I can figure out why. In the informal bidding, the contractor still has to be approved and qualified. One of the differences there is in formal bidding, those bids are opened in a public setting. Now, informal bidding, they are not open in a public setting, and the information's not disclosed until the council makes a contract award. And one of the reasons behind that is to make sure competitors and outside parties don't interfere with the bidding process, and that could happen. So that takes care of that portion of it. And then we also discussed or commented on the construction contracts, how we allow the contractor to bill the town. And that's basically done on a monthly basis, which is fine, but we have noted that sometimes, in a couple instances, I think our contractor has gotten ahead of us. He's gotten more of his money than he has done into the project, so things tend to get they slow up. So we're wanting to, our next contracts, we're going to change that, also, the contract allows for retainage to be withheld after a substantial amount. We're going to eliminate that, and they will get, their final payment will be when they get everything done, the punch items are done. Because otherwise what happens, that's not normally a large dollar amount, so they tend to drag the punch item completion out on us. One other thing that we talked about was daily liquidated damages. I think right now that number for us is around $200. We're recommending that be pushed up to $500 a day following the absolute completion date. So if they miss that completion date, then they'll be assessed a penalty of $500 per day on that. So that was basically what we all talked about, and we'll be implementing those items in our next contracts. When we come to approve any new contracts, you'll see that information in there, and we can approve or disapprove it at that point in time.
I have one question. You mentioned the formal bids are open
In a public setting.
Public setting. But if we only get 2 out of 3, we don't open them at all, right?
We have to go back
Not for the
next bid.
Okay.
Right. Now, and then we can come, by that time, one could come back,
Right.
which we would
I
do.
just didn't want to leave the impression that if we had that, then we're going to open everything. We don't do it if we don't.
No,
do the first round.
no, the first round.
Okay.
You have to re-advertise the bid.
Yes.
And then give it that's 1 week or 10 days,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
And I think what is happening, basically, as you know, in town, we got two contractors, Barnhill and RPC, and that vacillates back around. And in, I think, one of our last bids, the one job we were doing, the one contractor bid so high that it wasn't even it was a no-brainer who we had to go to. Now, if they don't want the job, that's what'll happen. And we've, as we said, there's tried to find other contractors, gone to Elizabeth City, but when you're dealing with asphalt, those two local ones have their own asphalt plants, and I doubt they would be selling to their competitor at a wholesale price. So that adds in dimensions into it. So that was our meeting, very productive, and we'll wait for the financials to be audited.
Thank you, Leo. Any questions? Any other questions? Any old business, council, that you want to discuss? David? New business. I have nothing I want to talk about tonight. Town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I just have one item to report on tonight. Last Friday, I attended the North Carolina Coastal Federation's Offshore Drilling Conference in New Bern. This was a conference that had been planned for a while by the Federation. Local governments in North Carolina, from the South Carolina line to the Virginia line, were present. Also, numerous nonprofits, including our Visitors Bureau here, our Chamber of Commerce, and the Association of Realtors, and I was happy to see some Southern Shores residents there as well, including Mr. and Ms. Sam Williams, who are here tonight. They were also in attendance, and they attended the whole session. I was only able to attend the first half. I will report to you there were some interesting topics. There was a science panel and an economics panel, as well as some of the Bureau speakers there as well, including the Secretary of DENR and also the Chief of the Strategy Resources section of the Ocean Energy Management Bureau that is charged with administering leases offshore and et cetera, putting them out for bid and coordinating the NEPA process for that. One of the more interesting speakers there, though, was one of the planners for Carteret County, who briefed us on the law with regard to revenue sharing. And I think everybody was very interested in hearing that up front. If there is to be revenue sharing through the state of North Carolina, there has to be the Congress actually has to change the existing law to allow for that. Currently, states in the Gulf are the only ones who are participating in revenue sharing. So if North Carolina were to do that, if there was a lease that was awarded in the future, and there was revenue in the form of lease payments or royalties, then the only way that North Carolina or the other states, South Carolina and Virginia, could participate is if there was an amendment to current federal statutes. In addition to that, North Carolina statutes have an award scheme, whereas if royalties ever do come, there's also a statute that awards the money out in a predetermined formula to other state agencies, not local governments. So that would have to be changed as well if local governments were ever able to participate in revenue sharing. So that was one of the more interesting components of the conference. Of course, the rest of the conference was a balancing act. It wasn't objective. I will say the speakers there were objective, and the attendees were objective as well. It was a balance between determining risk, obviously, if an award is ever made of a lease, the risk factor if there is a release offshore, as opposed to the economy of the various counties in the state. And of course, tourism is our economy, so we were well represented there at the conference. Lee Nettles, the director of the Tourism Bureau, did have a major part in one of the panel discussions. But it was an eye-opener. The slides are on the Coastal Federation's website for the public to see and view. But there were about 300 people in attendance there, so it was very well attended. And again, there were some residents of here in Southern Shores, a lot of other Dare County people as well, including Hatteras Island. So I thought it was a well worth the time spent to network with that group in that setting. On another note, that was my report for tonight, but the clerk and I have gone through and don't foresee any action items for the council to attend to in the middle part of August. So I'd like to bring that to your attention. You do have a noticed August 18th meeting that at this point, we don't foresee any action items that would need to be attended to. So you might consider a notice of cancellation of that tonight if you wanted to, Mr. Mayor. But other than that, that's my report.
Thank you, Peter. Let's address that right now, council, the August 18th meeting, get that behind us one way or the other. What are your thoughts about that?
I see no need for it.
I don't have any
I have nothing.
item. I think we probably ought to.
Can I have a motion that we
So moved.
have the August 18th meeting?
So moved not to have the August 18th
Thank you.
meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you.
Clerk? Thank you. Town Attorney?
I don't have anything to report, Mayor Bennett. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to comment briefly on one thing in particular, only because I think it warrants your knowing some things that maybe you don't know or don't appreciate. When I attended the meeting yesterday morning at the county level and talked about the impact on Southern Shores, we had done our homework pretty carefully. The thing you have to remember, and I didn't mention this at the meeting because I didn't think it was appropriate at the time, we were one of the few towns in Dare County, possibly the only town in Dare County, with no debt service. We're not carrying a big load of loans we have to pay back, and most of the other towns are, and looking forward to more debt service with if and when their beach nourishment projects go through. We don't have that burden. We do have, I think we have had over the past 5-6 years, an exceptionally well-managed budget. And I'm not throwing bouquets at anybody, I'm just stating facts. We are in very solid shape financially. Yeah, it would impact us, but I was honest about the impact. It's not going to put us out of business if we have to lose that sales tax revenue. It's going to impact us greatly, but if the ad valorem tax growth rate continues to fall up as it has for the past 5 years, that'll help cover some of those dollar shortfalls. I don't know what the impact's going to be. I think those of you who were there heard Representative Tyne speak, and he admitted very openly, this thing's in limbo. There's so many factors and things they don't know right now about what's going to happen with the sales tax. Of equal concern to some of the municipalities on the Outer Banks is the MSD issue, municipal service districts, where they can't, if that goes through, they won't be able to tax their residents that benefit the most, pay the most tax. For example, what Duck's planning to do next year with their beach nourishment program. They're going to ask their oceanfront residents to help pay a greater share of the cost of that beach nourishment than their interior residents pay, as is Kitty Hawk. And if that legislation passes, that could kill their projects because they wouldn't be able to raise the money to be able to guarantee the money being there in order to finance the project. So they have little different issues than we have, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to belabor the fact that we're going to go out of business next week if we don't, or raise taxes on our residents if we don't get this sales tax revenue. It would be difficult for us, there's no question about that, but it wouldn't be devastating. That's the only thing I had to say. I just want to clear that up a little bit. I went into it. I felt pretty comfortable in the numbers we were working with and where we stood with it, and I still feel that way. Council members. Councilman Hess?
I have nothing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't have anything tonight.
David?
Nothing.
If there's no other business at this time, I'd ask for a motion to go into closed session as permitted by NCGS 143-318-11, little a, little 6, personnel reasons.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.